All right, let's dive into the world of financial controllers. We've got this recent article from Workable, the hiring platform. It's called 10 plus proven financial controller interview questions plus answers. And it was just published last month.
Hmm.
But we're not just talking about acing an interview here. We're going deeper to see what makes a successful financial controller, really tick.
Right.
Whether you're hiring one or want to become one or just want to understand the financial side of business.
Yeah.
And trust me, there's more to it than just playing with spreadsheets.
Oh, there's a lot more to it than that. A lot more than just number crunching.
I bet. The article even mentions that a lot of these folks, they've got master's degrees and certifications like a CPA or CMA.
Yeah.
That's serious commitment.
It is.
Plus, they're not just stuck in spreadsheets. They're leading teams, navigating crazy financial landscapes, and basically keeping the whole business ship afloat.
Yeah, keeping the ship afloat, absolutely.
So it's a pretty demanding role, I imagine.
It is. It is. It's demanding, for sure. You need to be able to think strategically, have all the technical expertise, and also you got to have those people skills.
Okay, so let's break this down. The article starts with 10 good interview questions for financial controllers.
Okay.
But I was thinking we use these as like jumping off points for bigger discussions. What do you think?
Sounds good. Let's see what we can find out.
Perfect. So question number 1 is all about developing a budget. What are the most important factors to consider, it asks. Seems pretty straightforward, but I'm guessing there's more to it.
Oh, absolutely. Way more to it than meets the eye. A good controller, they're not just adding up numbers, they're thinking strategically.
Mm.
How to align the money with the company's goals. You got to understand the big picture, market trends, the competition, the long-term vision, and then translate that into a real financial plan.
So it's almost like being a financial architect, designing the whole framework for success.
Exactly. You got to be able to forecast the revenue, predict the expenses, and make sure every dollar is working towards those goals, those objectives.
And I imagine that takes a lot of teamwork with different departments, right? It's not like they're just hiding in an office with a calculator.
No, not at all. A good financial controller, they're always talking to other teams,
Right.
understanding their needs, and being creative to make the budget work for everyone.
Right. Because if marketing has a killer campaign idea but there's no budget, that's a problem.
Exactly. A good controller can bridge that gap, find the resources, make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, so we've got strategic thinking, communication, those are already important. What else stands out from these first few questions?
Well, there are a few questions about finding and using financial opportunities and also cutting expenses.
So not just managing the money, but making it work harder.
Exactly. A skilled controller is always looking for ways to improve profitability. Maybe renegotiating with vendors, streamlining processes, finding creative ways to boost revenue, always looking for opportunities.
It's like financial detective work, finding hidden savings, untapped potential.
Ah, I like that. It's about having a keen eye, seeing patterns and trends, and then being brave enough to take action.
Now, there's one quote that really caught my eye. It says, recall a time you identified a financial opportunity for your company.
Yeah.
What kind of answer would really impress you there?
For me, it's not just about the specific opportunity, it's how they went about it. Did they take initiative, really digging into the data, asking tough questions?
Right.
Did they think outside the box, challenge assumptions, explore different solutions? And this is important. Were they able to actually measure the impact of what they did?
So it's not enough to just say, hey, we could save money on office supplies. They need a plan and data.
Absolutely. And ideally, they can show results. Like by doing this, we reduced expenses by 10%. That shows they get it.
Makes sense. Now, a few questions touch on leadership, which I know we'll get into more later. But why is leadership so important for a financial controller? They're not running a sales team or anything.
True, true. But they are leading a team of finance professionals. And right now, talent is so scarce. So good leadership is crucial.
Yeah, you need to keep those top performers happy, especially in such a competitive field.
Exactly. A good controller has to motivate their team, build a collaborative culture, and give them opportunities to grow.
So it's not just about being a technical expert, it's about being a people person, too.
Absolutely. You have to communicate well, build trust, and inspire your team to do great things.
I'm starting to see why this role is so multifaceted. It's like financial wizardry meets strategic thinking with a dash of leadership thrown in.
It's a unique combination, that's for sure. And those who can do all three, they're in high demand.
Okay, so we've got strategic thinking, communication, financial analysis, and leadership all in the first few interview questions. What other themes come up as we go through this list?
Well, one that stands out is knowing your industry. There's a question about sizing up the financial strengths and weaknesses of the company's specific industry.
Makes sense. A financial controller can't work in a bubble. They need to know what's happening in the wider economy.
Exactly. They need to understand the trends, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the potential risks.
So, for example, if you're working for a tech company, all those things that could hit the company's finances.
Precisely. And a good controller can use that knowledge to make smart decisions about investments, allocating resources, and managing risk.
It's like being a financial chess player, thinking several moves ahead.
I like that. It's strategic thinking, seeing how the company's finances connect to the bigger picture.
All right, so we've got strategic thinking, communication, financial analysis, leadership, and now industry knowledge. Anything else stand out before we move on?
Well, several questions focus on clear financial reporting, especially when presenting to executives.
Because no one wants to be bored to death by a PowerPoint, especially when it's about numbers.
Exactly. A good controller needs to be able to boil down complex stuff into key points and present them in a way that people get and maybe even, find engaging.
So data visualization skills are probably pretty important then. Charts, graphs, dashboards, all that good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Being able to tell a story with the data, show the trends and insights that really matter, that's a vital skill.
And it goes back to communication. You could know everything about finance, but if you can't explain it, it's not helpful.
You got it. Communication is key, whether you're explaining something tricky to a coworker or presenting results to the board.
All right, so we've covered a lot just from skimming these interview questions. But before we move on, there's something I'm curious about.
What's that?
The article talks about internal controls quite a bit, and I have to admit, I'm a little fuzzy on what that even means. Sounds kinda intense.
It can be. It can be. But it's super important. Internal controls are basically the systems and processes a company uses to protect its assets, make sure the financial reporting is accurate, and comply with all the regulations.
So like checks and balances to prevent errors, fraud, anything shady.
Exactly. Think of it as a safety net for the company's money. A good controller needs to understand internal controls inside and out, identify risks, design and put controls in place, and then watch them closely to make sure they're working.
That sounds like a huge responsibility.
It is. It is. But it's vital for keeping any organization financially healthy and, honest.
Okay, so we've got strategic thinking, communication, financial analysis, leadership, industry knowledge, data visualization, and now internal controls. Are we missing anything?
Well, there's one more piece of the puzzle we haven't talked about yet. The human element.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What do you mean by that?
Well, besides all those technical skills and strategic thinking, a good financial controller also needs emotional intelligence.
EQ. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that right away, but yeah, it makes sense.
Right. Think about it. They're managing a team, working with other departments, presenting to the big bosses, maybe even dealing with people outside the company. That's a lot of people interaction. You need self-awareness, empathy, good communication.
So it's not just about the numbers, it's about understanding people. I like it. The article doesn't really talk about EQ, so let's explore that a bit. Can you give some examples of how EQ plays out for a financial controller?
Sure. Think about conflict resolution, for example. Budget season can be tough. Everyone wants a bigger piece of the pie. A controller with good EQ can be the mediator, helping different teams understand each other and finding solutions that work for everyone.
That's a good point. Being able to, read the room and cool things down would be super valuable, especially when you're dealing with people who maybe don't understand finance as well.
Exactly. And building relationships with those non-finance folks is important too. If you can explain those complex financial things in a way that's clear and simple, maybe even a little funny, you're going to have more success getting people on board with your ideas.
Okay, so EQ helps with internal stuff. What about dealing with people outside the company, like investors or auditors?
Just as important, maybe even more so. You have to present the information confidently, make it compelling, but also be transparent and address their concerns. That builds trust.
Makes sense. You don't want to seem like a robot or defensive. You have to connect with people, even when you're talking about, well, kind of boring financial stuff.
Right. And let's not forget about leading and motivating your own team. A controller who understands their team members, their strengths, their weaknesses, gives good feedback, and creates a positive environment, they're going to be much better at attracting and keeping those talented people.
It's funny because at first, when we started talking about financial controllers, I was picturing someone very analytical, detail oriented, maybe even a bit introverted. But now I'm seeing it takes a much wider range of skills, including a lot of emotional intelligence. It's like the best ones are a mix of logic and empathy.
That's a great way to put it. They need that analytical brain for the complexities of finance, but they also need that human touch to build relationships, earn trust, and be an effective leader.
Okay, we agree that EQ is important, but it's not something you can just learn overnight, right? Any advice for future financial controllers on how to improve their emotional intelligence?
Well, a good place to start is self-awareness. Take some time to really think about your strengths and weaknesses, your communication style, how you handle stress, how you typically react in different situations.
So, know thyself, ancient wisdom for the modern finance person.
It's timeless advice. And once you understand yourself better, you can start working on specific skills like actively listening, empathy, conflict resolution. There are tons of resources out there, books, articles, online courses.
It sounds like it's an ongoing process, not a one-time thing. You're always learning and getting better at EQ.
Exactly. And it's worth the effort, not just for your career, but for your overall well-being, too.
Well said. Now, before we get too deep into the touchy-feely stuff, let's go back to some of the hard skills. The article has a section called, What Does a Good Financial Controller Candidate Look Like? Anything surprising there?
Not really surprising, but it definitely emphasizes the importance of technical skills. They mention a deep understanding of financial principles, being good with accounting software, and having experience with financial reporting. Those are must-haves.
Which makes sense. Those are the basics, the foundation for everything else. You can't build a house without a strong foundation.
Exactly. And then on top of that, they talk about the leadership and communication skills we've already covered, plus some other good qualities like problem solving, attention to detail, ethical conduct.
Integrity is key, especially when you're handling sensitive financial information.
Absolutely. A good controller has to be trustworthy, reliable, and always act ethically.
Now, I'm curious about those red flags the article mentions. What are some signs that someone might not be right for the job?
Well, obviously, a lack of technical skills is a big one. If they don't know the accounting principles or can't use financial software, that's a no-go.
Right, that's obvious. But what about some less obvious red flags? The things that might not be clear in an interview?
One that stands out is poor communication. If they can't explain their ideas clearly or seem uncomfortable presenting information, that's a warning sign.
Especially with all the communication involved in this role, they have to talk finance with their team, but also explain it simply to the non-finance people.
Exactly. Another red flag is a lack of curiosity or being resistant to new ideas. Finance is always changing, so you need someone who can adapt, is eager to learn, and welcomes change.
So someone who seems stuck in their ways is not a good sign.
It's a red flag. You want someone who's always asking questions, looking for ways to improve things, and excited to stay ahead of the curve.
I see your point. One thing that stood out to me in the article was how the role of the financial controller is changing. It's not just bean counting anymore.
Oh, absolutely. It's become much more strategic and multifaceted.
We've already talked about leadership, communication, EQ, all those things that go beyond just crunching numbers.
Right. And with all the technology now, the role is going to keep evolving. Automation is already taking over a lot of the routine work, so controllers need to focus on higher level skills like analysis, interpretation, and making decisions.
So they're becoming more like financial advisors, giving insights and guidance to help the company make strategic decisions.
That's a great way to put it. They're not just reporting the numbers, they're helping to shape the future of the business.
And that brings us back to the trend of specialization we talked about earlier. The article mentioned that many controllers have master's degrees and certifications. Is that level of specialization becoming the new standard in finance?
It's definitely a trend we're seeing. As the role gets more complex and demanding, companies are looking for people with specialized knowledge and skills.
That makes sense. But I wonder if there's a downside to all this specialization. Does it create silos within organizations? Does it make it harder to find well-rounded people? We'll have to save that discussion for next time. We're just about out of time. Okay, so we were talking about the possible downsides of specialization in finance. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a tricky thing. Specialization can definitely make things more efficient. You get real experts in certain areas, which is great for companies. But if you go too far, you might end up with these silos where everyone's so focused on their own little area that they miss the big picture.
It's like that story, The Blind Man and the Elephant, each one feeling a different part and thinking it's something totally different.
Exactly. You need people who can see the whole elephant, understand how everything fits together. And that's why I think it's so important for financial controllers to develop those broader skills, leadership, communication, emotional intelligence, things that help them connect with people from different departments.
So while technical knowledge is essential, it's not the only thing. You need that big picture thinking and the ability to work well with people from different backgrounds with different expertise.
Absolutely. And that's something for both aspiring financial controllers and those hiring them to remember. Don't get so hung up on the technical qualifications that you forget about those human skills.
It's about finding that balance between specialization and being well-rounded.
Exactly. Now, getting back to what a financial controller actually does day to day, it might be helpful to give our listeners a clearer idea of what that looks like.
I agree. Let's break it down. What's a typical day for a financial controller?
Well, a typical day doesn't really exist. It all depends on the company, how big it is, how complex it is, the industry, and what problems they're dealing with at that moment.
Okay, fair enough. But I'm guessing it's more than just staring at spreadsheets all day long.
Oh yeah, for sure. While they do spend a decent amount of time analyzing data and putting together reports, they're also always interacting with people.
So meetings, presentations, brainstorming sessions, it's pretty dynamic.
It is. They could start the day meeting with the CEO, talking about the company's financial performance, then meet with the sales team to go over revenue projections, and then spend the afternoon working with the IT folks to set up a new accounting software system.
Sounds like they need to be able to switch gears quickly.
Adaptability is key.
Hmm.
And you got to be comfortable with things not always being clear-cut, with uncertainty.
Because in finance, things are always in flux.
Exactly. A good controller can keep their cool under pressure, think fast, and make the right decisions even when they don't have all the information.
So it's not a job for the easily stressed.
It's not. But it's also super rewarding. You're right at the heart of the business. You really impact the company's success.
And you get to work with numbers all day, which some people love.
That's true. For those of us who love data and analysis, it's a pretty sweet gig.
All right, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've explored the skills, the qualities, the tough parts, and the good parts of being a financial controller. What are the main takeaways for our listeners?
I think the biggest one is that the role of the financial controller is changing fast. It's not just about number crunching anymore. It's about being strategic, a leader, a good communicator, even a bit of a therapist sometimes.
I like that, a financial therapist.
Right. You have to be able to deal with complex relationships between people, build those relationships, communicate effectively with all kinds of people. And you have to be flexible, curious, always learning and growing.
So if you're thinking about a career in finance, or maybe you're hiring for this position, don't underestimate those soft skills.
Exactly. They're just as important as the technical skills, maybe even more.
Well, this has been really interesting. Thanks for sharing your insights.
Happy to do it. Always enjoy talking about this stuff.
And for our listeners who want to learn more about finance and different career paths, go check out Workable's website. They have tons of great resources for employers and job seekers.
It's a good starting point for anyone who wants to dig deeper into this world.
Okay, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of financial controllers. Until next time, keep exploring.